2 now of the Tupac Shakur murder trial. And once again, the defendant, Duane Keefe D. Davis, made his presence known in the courtroom in a way you typically don't see. Not just as a defendant, but as someone who seems determined to run the courtroom, like he allegedly ran the streets. Now, there is an especially fiery moment that came down just before court adjourned for the weekend. And today, Davis was at it again. Earlier today, Michael Dorsey was back on the stand. He is a documentary filmmaker who produced Murder Rap in 2015 with Greg Kading and later worked as a consultant on Death Row Chronicles. During interviews for Death Row Chronicles, Dorsey recorded audio on his phone capturing moments that weren't on the official BET tapes, and those recordings eventually turned into evidence in this case. So today, court kicked off with arguments outside the presence of the jury on whether parts of the recording should be allowed in. Before Dorsey got back on the stand, the defense attorney laid out his argument. He was trying to describe Dorsey's role, saying he was listening in to make sure Davis wasn't lying. But this attorney apparently couldn't remember the name of the interviewer who was in the room with Davis. And that is when Davis, from the defense table, shouted it out. It was picked up on microphones.
The problem with what we're doing now is this. Mr. Dorsey gets up there and testifies, and he says, look, my job, from what I understand, was to listen in to the interview that's being conducted between Mr. Davis and the interviewer, whoever that person is. And he's supposed to be there to really sort of make sure that Mr. Davis is not lying or saying something that's off from what he understands the 2008 proper session to be, the recording.
That was Davis appearing to try and help his own attorney, but there was another moment. This was during the cross-examination of Michael Dorsey, again, outside the presence of the jury. Dorsey was explaining that he made it a point not to run into Davis, and points out that he can see Davis's reaction to his testimony from the defense table.
Mr. Sam, you may cross.
Okay, Mr. Dorsey, you've never met Mr. Davis before.
We've never met. We've seen each other before.
Okay, so on the day of the recording, you made it a point to not run into Mr. Davis, fair?
Correct.
You were actually in this other room.
That's correct.
And you're there just with headphones on.
Yes.
And
I saw him walk by. I know
right.
he's disagreeing with me right now. I watched him go by.
Sure, and that's fine.
And he looked at me.
Okay, are you done with the answer?
Yeah, I sure am.
Okay.
And then later, the judge asked the jury if they needed a break, and they didn't. But apparently Davis did. So instead of leaning over and quietly telling his attorney, he raised his hand, waving his arm to get the judge's attention.
Let's see, we've been going for about an hour and a half. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, do you guys have to take a restroom break? Anyone? Raise your hand. Okay. If you want to just do maybe another half hour and then we'll take our lunch break? Okay, perfect. Do you need to use the restroom? Oh, all right, we will have to take our break now. So we will take a recess. During the recess, you are admonished not to talk or converse amongst yourselves or with anyone else on any subject connected to the trial, or read, watch, or listen to any report or commentary on the trial of any person connected to this case by any medium of information, including without limitation, newspaper, television, internet, radio, or form or express any opinion on any subject connected with the trial until it is submitted to you. Please rise for the jury. We'll see you guys back here at, let's say, 11:40.
These moments are telling. Davis is not just sitting quietly and letting his lawyer do the work. He appears to be inserting himself directly into the proceedings. We saw an especially tense moment on Friday before the lunch break where Davis actually stood up and addressed the judge. He was frustrated that his witnesses had testified, private information had been shared, and he blamed the prosecutor, who in turn had some words for Davis.
They keep giving out my address. They broke in my house. Vandalized my house, vandalized my wife's car, you know what I'm saying, because they keep giving out our address. Now they gave out my sister's address. This stuff is wrong.
I've heard it's going on both ways, that there's concerns both ways.
They're wrong.
I've admonished them to talk to their witnesses and anyone they can communicate about these issues, okay? So your attorney let me know what's going on.
I get beat up by the cops. The guy attacked me in here, sent me to prison. This is wrong, and it's mostly this guy.
For the record, you're pointing at Mr. DeJohn.
Yeah, for the record, I think he's indicating he's upset I'm prosecuting him for murder.
No, I'm not upset because you're in danger of my family's life.
Okay. State, again, like we talked about at the bench, you're going to stay in communication with your witnesses about not doing any of that. Goes both ways. Mr. Stamps, you'll talk to your client about not communicating with witnesses as well.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, perfect.
All of those fireworks took place on Friday. But I want to get back to Michael Dorsey and what happened today. Now, Dorsey was a consultant hired by a production company that was behind Death Row Chronicles, and his job was to listen in on the interviews from a separate room through a speaker. Well, Davis was being questioned on camera, and he was there to help filmmakers verify that Davis was telling the truth, especially since the documentary was also going to use audio from the 2008 proffer interview that we have talked about in some other episodes. But here's the issue. Dorsey didn't just listen. He also recorded everything with his phone. He made surreptitious recordings of the entire interview, including moments when the cameras weren't rolling. And some of those off-camera moments captured conversations between Davis and his attorney, a man named Wayne Higgins. And that's where the legal fight started. The defense argued that those off-camera conversations were protected by attorney-client privilege and that Davis had a reasonable expectation of privacy when he was talking to his lawyer during breaks. But the prosecution has pushed back on that. They argued there was no expectation of privacy. Davis was in a recording studio. He was surrounded by crew members with microphones on him, and he had signed a release. He knew that he was being recorded. And at one point, he even said, quote, "This is a hot mic." So the judge had to decide if those conversations were privileged or fair game. So Dorsey went back up to the stand, and he made it clear Davis knew exactly what was happening. But the defense went hard at Dorsey, and it went so off the rails that prosecutors eventually objected. Subscribe before we go further, because the arson findings are not in yet. And when they land, I will tell you exactly what changed.
Mr. Dorsey, you've never met Mr. Davis before.
We've never met. We've seen each other before.
Okay, so on the day of the recording, you made it a point to not run into Mr. Davis, fair?
Correct.
You were actually in this other room,
That's correct.
and you're there just with headphones on.
Yes.
So,
And I saw him walk by. I know
Right.
he's disagreeing with me right now. I watched him go by,
sure, and that's fine.
and he looked at me.
Okay, are you done with the answer?
Yeah, I sure am.
Okay. Now, in terms of your work, I want to make sure I'm clear. Are you working as an employee of BET?
No,
Okay, what are you at that point?
I am a contract employee, work for hire, as a technical consultant for specifically this production. I'm not hired by BET. I'm hired by the production company.
By the production company?
Yes, sir.
And that's Entertainment One?
Entertainment One and Creature Films, like a subsidiary of Entertainment One.
All right. And then in terms of your work with Entertainment One, that was bound with a confidential agreement, right?
Yes.
Do you have proof right now that you're no longer bound to that agreement?
I do. I have a letter from an attorney at Paramount Pictures, which owns BET, approving me sharing my information. And then I also have an email from Mark Ford, the head of Creature Films, also saying he had no objection.
Subscribe before we go further. The defense kept pressing.
So in your work with Entertainment One, what you basically do is you have your phone or whatever recording device down
Yes.
next to the monitor in which you're listening to a conversation.
Correct.
You cannot tell us who's where in your recording, correct?
Correct.
You just hear noises, right?
That's right.
Now, in terms of the actual recording itself, as the individuals sitting there, are they sitting with mics on their lapels as they're sitting there being interviewed by that person?
What you mean, the person conducting the interview, is he wearing a mic?
Is he wearing a mic, and is the person that he's interviewing wearing a mic?
I don't know if the Mario Diaz, for example, is conducting the interview. I don't know if he was wearing a lapel mic, but there would be two mics in the room minimum. There would be a lapel mic on Keefe, and then there would be a shotgun mic over him that is kind of capturing everything else in the room.
Right. And so, in terms of what you're recording, you don't know, for instance, if the cameras are on and off because you're actually just listening to sound.
That's correct.
And in terms of the interview, you understand that Wayne Higgins was in the room as well as
Yes.
Mr. Davis.
Yes, he was there for the entire first interview, and then he was like 10 minutes late to the second interview.
All right. Now, before we were listening to this, are there any moments at all where Mr. Davis is talking loudly during what you would think would be a private conversation?
loudly. He's just using a normal indoor voice is what I would say.
Okay, and then
And-
when you say that there was this statement that this is a hot mic,
Yes,
fair to say that that was a reminder to whoever he's talking to that, hey, this should be kept private.
correct.
All right.
Yeah.
So there were times where there was an understanding, or at least an idea that what they were going to have a conversation about.
There was one time, that was the only time.
Now, after you had recorded what you did in this
Yes.
case, which is the entire thing,
Correct.
you never had his permission to record all of it, right?
I didn't need his permission.
Why?
Because he's there to be recorded. He's got mics on him. He has lights and a camera pointed at him. He's in a production studio. I'm officially hired on as a crew member. I'm allowed to do whatever I want.
No.
And-
Let's back up here to make
Okay.
sure I'm clear.
Sure.
You're a crew member, but you don't own the rights to the production itself, right?
Correct.
And you don't own the rights in terms of what the camera angles are or anything along those lines.
That's correct. I could
Now-
not put this on YouTube and profit from it.
Okay, well, back up here again. I want to make sure I'm clear. Did you take that audio recording that you made and give it to either Entertainment One or any of the subsidiaries in this case?
No,
Okay, so you basically took something that you didn't have permission to take.
that's not true.
Okay, well, back up here. Tell me who you got permission from.
I didn't need permission. Do you understand? There's no permission needed for that. I'm there to do it. I made the recording because he showed up for the first interview, not ready for his interview to be conducted. So I knew it was going to be broken up into 2 days. So I said, I'm going to make a recording of this so that I can make sure we ask the correct follow-up questions when we come back. That's the only reason I made this recording.
But you're not the contract person. You don't have a contract with
I
this.
apologize, we're way afield of the issue that the court needs to rule upon, and this sounds like cross-examination for a jury.
Oh, I'll get back into it, Jerry. I'm just saying as of right now, Judge, we have a problem because, thank you. And just to make sure I'm clear, you take that recording and that's the recording that you're now publishing here for this jury, right?
Publishing, no. Playing for the jury, yes. Publishing it suggests publicly. I'm not putting this out to the public.
That was a legal terminology,
Okay.
but you're playing that for the jury now.
Yes,
right?
sir.
I have no further questions.
After hearing from both sides, the judge made her decision.
In general, the attorney-client privilege under 49.095 is broken when you speak in front of a third party who's unrelated to the legal team. Here, it appears as though Mario Dorsey and there others were potentially present for the conversations. Additionally, the setting of the interview itself does not lend itself to a belief that the conversations would be privileged and or private. It's a recording studio. The purpose is there to be recorded. A release is signed so that the person can be recorded. The entire room is microphoned up. Additionally, there are microphones on the people participating in the interview. In general, this isn't a situation that would lend itself to private conversations. I think based on the testimony, they are not privileged conversations.
Essentially, the judge ruled out the attorney-client privilege, meaning the off-camera conversations became fair game. Now, with the legal issues resolved, the jury was ready to hear the recordings, but those recordings from the 2017 interviews, they can't be played here due to copyright restrictions. So here are some of the key moments from the July 28th interview that the jury heard. At one point, Davis appeared to open up the interview about Sean Diddy Combs. Back in the day, he was then known as Puffy. His name changed a couple times since, right? And his alleged fear of Suge Knight, who was the head of Death Row Records. You remember that East Coast, West Coast rap rivalry of the 1990s. Now, Davis can be heard in the recording saying, quote, Puffy was scared of Suge. He was really scared of the dude. It wasn't no game. He was out of college, you know? He also talked about the offer that Combs allegedly made to pay Davis for killing Tupac and Suge. And he can be heard in that recording saying, quote, he wanted to get rid of them dudes, his problems, CEO, the big guy, yeah. When the interviewer pressed further, asking if Davis and his crew were cool with helping Combs, Davis pushed back, saying, quote, no, we ran into him at the House of Blues. The interviewer then asked Davis directly, did Puffy ever pay him? And this is what he said. No, because it was hot, you know? You can't just jump out there like that. Got to be smarter in this game. You know what I'm saying. Otherwise, they take your bleep down. Now, according to Davis, the payment was supposed to come through an intermediary, but it never arrived. And he expressed frustration about the situation, saying, quote, I hate the day I met Puff. He destroyed my life. He's super rich, bleeper, ain't even send me a pair of Sean John drawers. Now, when the interviewer asked if he was upset about not getting paid, Davis again pushed back. saying, quote, I am a kingpin. I was making more money than Puff. I had all the money, all the women. I didn't need the money. Later in the interview, Diaz asked Davis about his nephew, a man named Orlando Baby Lane Anderson. Davis opened up about how he was loved. Quote, Orlando was well respected, good student in school. Everybody loved him. He liked Tupac too. And when asked why Anderson was never charged for anything related to the shooting of Tupac Shakur, Davis said, quote, he didn't brag. That's against the code, dog. Davis also talked about his relationship with Suge Knight, how they'd known each other since they were kids, and when asked if Suge ran Death Row Records like a gang, Davis didn't hesitate. Quote, yeah, he hired all gang members. I guess money gave him the power. You know, money is power. Now, later in the interview, Davis was asked if he ever felt bad about what happened to Tupac, and he said, quote, I wish it never happened. It changed my whole bleeping life. I lost my plug. Colombian boy left, went back to Bogota. He didn't want to be caught up in our BS. And later, quote, Tupac should have stayed in his lane. You're not a gangster. You're a bleeping rapper. I told you earlier, stay in your bleeping lane, dude. You're not doing what we're doing. Gave the jury something else entirely. Eyewitness accounts and documentary evidence that put Davis's own words front and center. The prosecution called Leonard Jefferson. He's the man who took the last known photograph of Tupac Shakur alive just minutes before the shooting in Las Vegas. Jefferson testified that he came to Vegas for the Mike Tyson fight, but he ends up selling his tickets for $2,500 each, and he was just people watching at MGM instead. Now, while in the lobby, he recognized Tupac in his entourage. He had met Tupac before back in LA because Jefferson sold cars to people who were affiliated with Death Row Records. So he was introduced to Tupac at a studio. Now, later that night, Jefferson says he was driving down Las Vegas Boulevard in his white Suburban. He was stopped at a red light when a car pulled up next to him. The wheels caught his attention. Then he looks up, and there's Tupac Shakur. And who's with him in the car? Suge Knight. Subscribe before we go further, because the arson findings are not in yet. And when they land, I will tell you exactly what changed.
I was stopped at a light, and a car rolled up. Or really, the wheels really caught my attention, and then I looked up and I saw it was Tupac and Suge sitting in the car.
Well, did you try to interact with Mr. Shakur or Mr. Knight?
With Tupac, I did.
Okay. And what happened? Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I said, hey, what up, Pop? And then he kind of looked and kind of took like a double take. He said, oh, what up, man? And then I said, hey, where you guys headed? He said, we're headed to the club. You should follow us. I said, all right, cool. And then, I don't know, I said, man, let me get a picture real quick. And I had my camera in my center console, so I just grabbed my camera and snapped the picture.
Jefferson said he had a 35mm camera in his center console. Remember, this is the 90s, long before camera phones were even close to being a thing. So as the light turns green, Tupac's car takes off, and he took this picture. Now, Jefferson ends up following the caravan. He was about 3 cars back, he says, and at some point, he made a right turn onto Flamingo Road, and then he heard it.
When I get on the phone, I was calling California Pizza Kitchen to cancel my food order.
Because you're heading to the club, right? You don't need CPK anymore.
Yeah, I don't need CPK. So while I was on the phone with him, like 30 seconds or so, and then all of a sudden I just hear pop, 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 and I kind of like, like looking around, and then I see the cars were stopped, and I see the people in front that were in the cars. They got out of the car and ran to the front. They ran to the BMW.
So you hear gunshots.
Yes.
But you don't. Do you see where the gunshots are coming from?
I did not know.
And do you see who's doing the shooting?
I did not know.
You just hear the gunshots.
I just hear them. Yes. I made the U-turn. I catch up to. I'm behind the Lexus. It was a green Lexus. So I'm behind him, and then we see Suge make the wide left turn back onto the strip, and he went up on the curb and came back down, and then we all went through the intersection. There was traffic coming through, and we just all made it through. and then we got to, I guess, Harmon. We got back to Harmon, and Suge makes another left turn, and now it's like cross traffic. He couldn't get through. And by this time, now we see the bicycle cops. There's a bicycle cop rolls up, and Suge is kind of like, stop here. This is Las Vegas. This is the street he turns on. So he's just stopped. And then the cop drops his bike, and I started to get out, and then I got back in once I saw the cops with him.
You look at the BMW at all?
I look at it, and then I see, like I said, the bicycle cop rolled up, and then he drops his bike, and then I see Suge getting out the car, and now the officer is yelling commands to him, get down, lay down, and you hear Suge saying, my man, pocket shot, we need help, pocket shot. And then the cops, I kind of blanked out, I didn't really hear what he said, and then the cop, for whatever, walked over there to Suge. Suge got up, and they walked over to the passenger side of the car. At that time, when that occurred, a police officer rolled up in a vehicle. He ran up and pulled a gun on me and ordered me out of the car. He opened my door and then threw me down, snatched me out of the car and threw me down on the ground. Now I'm like prone down on the ground. I'm in the direction I'm facing. I could see what's going on with the with the police and shit.
Did the officer give you an explanation as to why he was treating you in such a manner?
Yeah, I said, hey, what's going on? He said, we have witnesses saying that you were part of their entourage.
That photo would go on to become famous. It's been licensed for books, documentaries. It's used in news coverage. Jefferson acknowledged under cross-examination that he's profited from licensing that image. I mean, it's an iconic photo. But he said he didn't stage the scene in any way. The prosecution then played clips from the documentary, and the jury heard Davis's own words, and they heard him talked about the $60,000 paid to Orlando Anderson. They heard him say that he wanted to get the truth out, and they heard portions of the 2008 proffer interview where Davis described getting the gun from someone named Zip Martin, handing it to the back seat, and his nephew, Orlando, fired the shots. But according to Diaz, the interviews were not scripted. He didn't provide questions in advance. There was no coaching or coercion on his part. Well, after Davis later claimed that the documentary was actually, quote, scripted and just for show, Diaz and others lobbied to release the raw footage to police. On cross-examination, the defense pointed out that Davis was paid for his appearance and that the documentary used dramatizations and recreations. But Diaz maintained that Davis's words on camera were his own. So that was Friday. Then today you have the legal fight over those recordings that continued, but the jury has now heard Davis's own words, and the prosecution is building its case around what he himself has said.